All right, good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, September 21st, 2021, and we are the Athens-Clarke County Commission and Mayor coming to you live from Athens City Hall. We are gathered here for two purposes, for a special called session as well as our regularly scheduled executive session. I would like to ask Clerk Spratland to please call the roll.
Davenport,
Here.
Parker, Link. Here. Wright.
Present.
Denson.
Here.
Poole.
Present.
Edwards.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Thornton.
Here.
Handy.
Yes, I'm here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, we do have 3 items of new business that have been announced. I do need to entertain a motion first to consider suspension of rules. Do I hear such a motion?
So moved.
All right, I've got I'm going to call it a motion from Commissioner Denson, a second from Commissioner Houle. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We do need to amend the agenda to include an executive session following the conclusion of the agenda setting time. May I hear a motion to amend the agenda to add said executive session following discussion of the agenda setting items?
To clarify, Mr. Mayor, that's for discussion of personnel.
Thank you. For discussion of personnel. Yes, sir.
I'll move. Seconded.
All right, so I've got a motion to amend the agenda to include that item from Commissioner Link with a second from Commissioner Myers. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, we'll proceed. We have 3 items of new business that we're considering here under suspension of rules. The first is additional funding for the Athens-Clarke County COVID-19 Vaccine Incentive Program. What you can see embedded in the agenda report is that there has been great success at, in many cases, doubling, tripling, or quadrupling on a daily basis the number of individuals who've come to get vaccinated since we introduced the incentive program. In engaging with the Northeast Health District, a great area of interest in theirs is engaging with the 2 high schools for a vaccination event at the high schools, but they would have consumed all of the funds already allocated to them by the time that event would be able to be positioned on the calendar in October. And so this would call for an additional $100,000, and I know there's been some interest in looking beyond that, so certainly be glad for some input from commissioners.
Point of order. Do we do citizen input first?
We do need to do citizen input. Thank you very much. Anyone like to speak to any of the items on new business? 1, 2, 3 on the special called session. May come up to the podium, and you have 3 minutes. Just let us know your place or city of residence, your name, and then you'll see the light on Clerk Spratland's desk. You have 3 minutes. It'll be green when you begin speaking, yellow when you have 30 minutes remaining, and then red when your time is concluded.
Okay.
So good evening.
Good evening, Theresa Omanovich, CFO for Athenian First Development Corporation. Our address is 320 East Clayton Street, Athens, Georgia, Suite 436, Athens, Georgia 30601. I just want to say for the record, there seems to be a disconnect between what this council advocates for and what Athens-Clarke County government presents to you. You advocate for equity, inclusion, and transparency, but you're presented with business as usual. I would like to present to you this Policy Link article. It's the 10 priorities for advancing racial equality through the American Rescue Act. And I encourage you to work with your government to get on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Anyone else like to speak to any of the items on the special called session agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll return to commission discussion. So again, the first item of business is additional funding for vaccination promotion. So would any commissioner like to speak to that item? Commissioner Myers.
I'd like to move to amend the staff recommendation to include the following language and direct the county manager to create an RFP to solicit other healthcare providers to expand the vaccine incentive program to underserved areas.
Second.
All right, so
this
I
is-
have a motion from Commissioner Myers, second from Commissioner Edwards. Commissioner Myers, any further discussion?
No, I did send this out yesterday morning, this wording, and this is actually following up on some discussion that we had from the manager's office, and hopefully this gives him the consent from the commission that he was looking for so that we can use some of the other healthcare providers who are able to get into different parts of the community and really get our vaccination rates up.
Thank you. A seconder, Commissioner Edwards, any further comment?
Thank you, Commissioner Myers, for putting forward this proposal. We need to vaccinate our community by whatever means necessary and by reaching out into the community and engaging a pool of network providers, medical providers. I think we will achieve our goals more rapidly, so I'm looking forward to supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got Commissioner Thornton.
I definitely support this motion. I do. I think when I talked to County Manager Williams, he also said to reach out. We're going to reach out, I guess, to high school students in the district. And I posed a question that they also have received ARP dollars.
School district.
So maybe this needs to be a collaboration if we're going to reach out to the high schools. The other thing I want to say, I appreciate that the vaccine initiative is moving forward, but I hope we remember and think about these dollars in the communities that we're trying to reach and serve. We're talking about primarily, I'm not probably going to get some hate mail, our underserved communities, those communities that are traditionally not included, to restore those communities. This is primarily what the ARP money is for. So I could see this going in all kinds of ways. If we're not clear, we need to look at census tracts, we need to look at the type of clients that these medical professionals, every doctor does not take Medicare, every doctor does not take Medicaid. So we need to be, hopefully not to add or change anything in the amendment, but I do want to put it on record that everybody who is providing services are not providing services to the poor and underserved communities. But I do support the amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got Commissioner Hool as well.
Thank you, Mayor. I got a couple questions for staff and one for my colleagues. First for the colleagues, are we anticipating that the CDO language that the RFP process is going to be using the leftover funds from the administrative portion of the budget? So there was a $50,000 allocation, most of which was not used, or is that remaining unspecified at this time?
I believe we haven't designated a dollar figure
Okay, so we're just,
for that piece.
And I think the language with DPH was an up to 50,000, so they're only going to bill what they spend. And up till now, my understanding, it's been mostly for, police, off-duty police, because they're carrying a considerable number of cards with them. So they don't anticipate spending it all, but we haven't designated that. We don't know what's going to be left over. I assume it'll be most of it, but we haven't designated that yet.
okay. Well, I guess I'd just like to point out that that could be a source of funding because it doesn't sound like that's going to be used up based on what I'm reading so far. And I guess my two other questions for staff. When are we expected to get the demographic data that we discussed when we initially approved this? The idea was that this is going to be kind of a pilot. We would get data back on who we reached and who we've been missing and use that to inform if and how to renew. I don't want to stand in the way of renewing because it sounds like this event they have coming up is an important one, but I do think it's really important that we get that information before we continue to keep throwing large sums of money at this program. And so that when we do choose someone to partner with through this RFP, we know what we're asking them to do, who we're asking them to reach. So maybe that's more of a statement than a question. But the last question I really do have is, am I understanding, I think it's in Facts and Issues 9, it mentions boosters. So are we also giving $100 for booster shots? Because that does not match what I heard in our last meeting.
No, Commissioner, we are not, gift cards are not available for anyone receiving the third dose. It's only for those who have not been previously vaccinated.
Okay. Do we need to clarify that in the language because that's included here, or is that
Where is it?
solidly enough under? If we look at facts and issues 9, it says the additional $100,000, if awarded, would be used for an additional 500 first dose and 500 second dose gift cards, given the potential for FDA approval of booster shots and expanded age eligibility.
Yeah.
They believe they need it. So I guess I'm not,
Yes.
that makes it sound like they are expecting to use it for booster shots.
Well, we posed, and I appreciate those questions in advance because we turned and asked DPH. That's what the response that I just shared is what they respond. But if you, certainly you can be very specific in your motion.
Would you accept a friendly amendment, Commissioner Myers, that financial awards will not be given for booster shots?
Yes. I accept.
Meaning the third shot.
Third shot, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I certainly support Commissioner Meyer's motion, and like Commissioner Edwards says, we need to get our community vaccinated by any means possible. And I think it's imperative that we diversify the healthcare providers who are a part of this program as much as possible. We need to reach a diversity of our community, and we need to ensure that the healthcare providers that are going into these communities are people that they trust, that they know and trust. There's a whole lot of misinformation. I don't even like calling it misinformation. There are a whole lot of lies out there about the vaccine, and it's essential that we reach out to healthcare providers who are entrusted by a diversity of communities and make them part of this program so we can get our community vaccinated.
Commissioner Thornton.
Maybe I made a statement, and maybe it should have been a question. Again, I support the amendment. But Manager Blaine, and this is directed to Manager Blaine, have we reached out to the school district to see if when we go to vaccinate high school students, that they would be willing or able to help with the finances?
I don't know the answer to that. I will see the superintendent in the morning. I know that DPH has been coordinating with the school district on this event, but I don't know to the extent that the school district's participating in it.
Financially?
That's right.
Any further questions?
I do have one question for
Yeah.
Manager Williams, and that is, how long do you think it'll take for us to put together this kind of RFP so we can get those vaccination incentives out there?
I appreciate that, and I also appreciate Commissioner Thornton's telegraphing of what it is you want to achieve. So I just want to be clear about a few things for the public as well. And I know Attorney Drake has addressed this. The Department of Public Health is a state organization. With procurement law, we don't have to have a procurement process to partner through an intergovernmental agreement with a state agency. That's how we got to this point very quickly responded. I think it's proposed, and another thing that would be helpful is just order of magnitude how much of funds you'd like us to bring back to you. And I'll go through the process here in just a minute, Commissioner. But this is, I think, important for everybody to understand as well. So I think it's proposed that we're going to use American Rescue Act plan or American Rescue Plan funds for this, okay? While we don't have the final guidance, as you heard me say before, from the Treasury about how to do this, they have issued an interim final guidance on June 23rd. It says things explicitly, but not in fine detail, but it says any subrecipients, and that would be any nonprofit or for-profit entity beyond an intergovernmental agreement type approach, that there would be a procurement process involved, and that there would be a risk assessment given to any subrecipient. And this is germane to several things we're going to talk about tonight. And then, based on that risk assessment, that would determine the level of compliance monitoring that would need to be done. Okay? So I say all that to say, I understand what y'all want to do, and I appreciate the motion. So what I would like to do, and I'm thanking Commissioner Thornton because it's clear that you want to, target this towards underserved areas, and the best ways that I know is to look at qualified census tracts. So providers that are located there, but that doesn't mean their patient mix is necessarily indigent, as the Commissioner brought up. So then Another thing we might put in selection criteria would be, percentage of indigent, that would be one, and perhaps Medicaid, things of that nature. Those are the ones that immediately come to mind, and we will search for others. If you have others, we're glad to hear those, to try and affect the goal of what it is you want to achieve, and you're clear about that. Let's incentivize vaccinations in underserved areas, and those would be through providers. So that's what we'll seek to do, Commissioner Myers. We would bring that back to you for your approval on October the 5th for a budget amount that you want to dedicate for that purpose, which would inform the RFP, which would then go out. And I would suggest 30 days, like I would on virtually any RFP that we do, because that not only gives folks time to learn about it and respond, and then when we get those back in 30 days, we can see, how many meet the criteria. At that point, we really need to figure out if you've got 50 providers that meet the criteria and you've only given $50,000, does everybody get $1,000? And is that really 5 patients each? You see, so there's things that we need to think through as far as the allocation. But I would recommend October 5th, you authorize it. We'll bring to you what the RFP looks like and a recommendation on the amount. We'll obviously give it to you in advance of the meeting. You can discuss it, approve it then. We'll put it out on the street hopefully the next day and market it towards providers that we know of in those areas. And we would ask you and your networks to let folks know as well in your districts and have them apply. And then early November, tally the responses and then make a recommendation to you, perhaps at a special call meeting either at the work session or the agenda setting session in November.
Follow up for Manager Williams, Commissioner Holt?
Can we make sure that the report that accompanies that agenda item on the 5th includes, as up to date as possible, the demographic information of who's been reached by this program? To me, that's pretty crucial. I think baseline, we need to be trying to reach the populations that Commissioner Thornton is speaking to. I also think it's important for us to be able to identify what gaps we may have. For example, are we only reaching people who have mobility to come to events and therefore might be missing seniors who are more homebound? Are we successfully reaching young people or not, et cetera?
I don't know what level of demographic data they are collecting at this point, but I will find out and follow up with you. I know that they have an attestation form that they have everybody sign that attests to either you living, working, or attending school in Clarke County, Athens-Clarke County. And thus far, 650 of the folks they've served live in Clarke County, 241 work in Clarke County, and 96 attend school in Clarke County. And I think that's the level of demographic information that they've got at this point, but I'll confirm that.
Well, and they're also asking if they attend a school, for example, the university, right? Because I remember us talking about getting contributions from the university if what we're finding is that a lot of this money is going to their staff and students.
So of the ones that did respond to that, 9 indicated Athens Tech and 34 indicated the University of Georgia.
I guess parting thought is I would encourage my colleagues to think about how we might be able to use that information, especially if that number grows, to figure out how UGA can maybe contribute more to this.
Any further questions before we call for a vote? All right, there's a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on to item 2, which, I apologize, that's right, it was a budgetary item. Could you read the ordinance, please, Attorney Drake, for item number 1 on the special call session?
I might need some help because I don't have my laptop with me. I apologize.
So it would be an ordinance to amend the FY22 budget to approve $100,000 for the Northeast Health District to provide vaccination incentives.
An ordinance to amend the FY 2022 budget to provide a $100,000 vaccination incentive the last part, Mr. Mayor.
To the Northeast Health
To
District.
the Northeast Health District. I apologize, y'all.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Did I pass the board, Chad?
Did you what? You did.
Just wanted to make sure that I was all legal now. All right, moving on to the eviction prevention program. Item number 2, you can see that there was a single applicant for this program, and staff has asked for some more time to do due diligence And so I'd open up the discussion to the commission. First Commissioner Hool, then I'll turn to Commissioner Wright.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to hold this item until the October 5th meeting, so everybody can have more time to try to make sense of the best way forward from here.
Second.
All right, there's a motion from Commissioner Hool, second from Commissioner Edwards. All right, Commissioner Edwards as seconder, is there any additional comment you'd like to make?
I think seeing that we only got one respondent, we need to maybe consider where we go from here, so this will give us a little more time.
Commissioner Wright?
I'll make a substitute motion to go with the staff's recommendation. I do agree that we need to cast this net again and have more time to see a larger applicant pool, and I think that the staff has already mapped out what those next steps would be in the current agenda item. So my substitute motion is to vote on what's in the agenda.
All right, substitute motion to award no contract and allow staff to move forward with.
Oh, this is, oh. So
Is
it's
there,
my
is there a
comment?
second for the substitute?
Maybe not.
Second.
All right, substitute, motion from Commissioner Wright, second from Commissioner Hamby. Commissioner Hamby has a second, or any follow-up?
No, I think, you know, I mean, if this doesn't go through, I'll vote to hold it, but I think holding it has, you know, just drags it out longer. I mean, what staff is going to do, they can get started tomorrow, working on something that helps. And this may be the thing that helps, but it does, you know, eventually we'll have more time that'll come back to us one way or the other.
Commissioner Thornton?
I am going to vote no on this. I think that we get information later than before, and I think we put people and folk that are hopeful about some things. I'm still not clear on why we only had one. And it makes me wonder if it's something on our part as far as administration. I still have too many questions. I do think that, and I think County Manager Blaine alluded to his interpretation of proposals and ARP, which I think I differ with him. But I do look forward to talking to the manager before this comes back up again. But I am voting no because this is one of those other situations that we just do not have enough information, and then we come back and have to redo. I'm just, either we know what we're doing or we don't. And I do look for the opportunity to talk to the manager about my interpretation, and I will be voting no.
Commissioner Hool?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the reason why I'd prefer to hold rather than vote in favor of the substitute motion is primarily, you know, we need time to make sense of what a next step is, and I think that includes probably a lot of what staff is recommending, but we also need time to, I think, engage with the one organization that did apply to better understand where they came from. The problem isn't that we only got one applicant, although that is also dismaying. The problem is that we didn't get an applicant who was recommended for approval. I think if we got an applicant that HCD recommended for approval tonight, we'd be moving forward. And the reason why we set up an aggressive timeline was in hopes of being there, and we're not there. And so I think waiting 2 weeks allows us more time to take a thoughtful next step, since we're already failing to meet the timeline that we had set out for ourselves.
All right, we have a substitute motion, a second on the floor. Any further comment before we do round robin? All right, Clerk Spratlin, if you could call roll, beginning with Commissioner Wright, and it's on the substitute motion to accept the staff recommendation.
Wright,
Yes.
Denson,
No.
Poole,
No.
Edwards,
No.
Myers,
Yes.
Thornton,
No.
Hamby,
Yes.
Davenport,
No.
Blink.
No.
3 yes, 6 no.
All right, so motion fails to carry. We return to the original motion on the floor to hold this till the October vote. And I think primary on this was Commissioner Hool, so we'll begin round with Commissioner Hool.
Poole,
Yes?
Edwards,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Thornton,
No.
Hamby,
Yes.
Davenport,
Yes.
Blink,
Yes.
Wright,
Yes.
Denson,
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
All right, motion carries. All right, we're moving on to third item, which is a resolution approving and authorizing settlement that has been managed by Attorney's Office. Do I hear a motion or any input? Commissioner Wright?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion from Commissioner Wright, second from Commissioner Edwards. Any further input? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, we are going to go ahead and move into the agenda-setting component of our agenda. Same rules of public input apply, and we will have 3 opportunities for public input. First on the consent agenda, then on new business. We have no old business. And then finally, we'll have public input on the single zoning item that's on the agenda. So would anyone like to speak from the public to the consent agenda, which on our agenda-setting meeting is item 1 through 13? Would anyone like to speak to any item on the consent agenda? Would any commissioner like to remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion? Commissioner Edwards?
Yeah, number 1.
All right. Commissioner Myers?
9 and 10?
All right. 9 and 10. Commissioner Hool?
6 and 7, please.
6 and 7. All right. All right. Would any member of the public like to speak to any items of new business, which now include 1, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 14 through 21? 1, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 14 through 21. Would anyone like to speak to any of those items? All right, hearing none from the assembled masses, we're going to move to item number 1. Commissioner Edwards, you asked this to be removed from consent. I'll go ahead and give you an opportunity to make some comments.
Yes, I'd like to, and I'll make this motion at the voting meeting, but basically I'd like to hold this item to a time indefinite. We just need more time to speak with residents in this area, so I'll talk with the mayor. Maybe we can just sort of leave it off the agenda and not have to deal with this at the voting meeting. So.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you.
Certainly, and I know I've received some input from folks in that neighborhood. So, any further input on that item? All right, we're going to move on to item 6. Commissioner Hool, you asked that this be brought for discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for staff, and then perhaps a follow-up question. Could these MDTs be used for anything other than police purposes? For example, we're giving this is an agenda item for us to give MDTs, mounted mobile data terminals, to another police department, and I believe it's the city of Thomson. And I'm wondering if these MDTs could be used for other purposes other than police purposes. For example, MDTs in general can be used by transit systems or ambulances or other vehicles, or people might have a value for this.
Well, we can certainly ask, but as you know, Commissioner Huell, we've done this before, and one of the reasons why the city of Thomson, Georgia is near and dear to us is because a former police officer has left Athens-Clarke County, now works there as well. So it's just kind of traditional, if you will, to kind of help other police departments out. But we certainly can ask our police officers to research within our organization to see if somebody else needs it, if that's what you're asking.
It is what I'm asking, yeah. Between other ACC, unified government departments, the school district, or nonprofits in town, for example, perhaps the Council on Aging, I'm just thinking of them because they have vehicles that they transport people in, and they also have a Meals on Wheels program, that maybe these devices could stay within the Athens-Clarke County community since they've been paid for with Athens-Clarke County community dollars in the first place. So with that in mind, I'd like to keep it off consent, please.
Okay. Any further input on that item, on 6? All right, moving on to 7, Commissioner Hool.
Yeah, I had a variety of questions. I don't want to slow down the meeting for them, so I shared them by email, but the summary of them is essentially, I'm wondering if UGA is going to be contributing for the cost of us closing streets while this is built and not just paying for the infrastructure, or are we bearing the cost of staff being there to close streets and things? And then also, who, both in the unified government but also in the public, has access to the data or footage that these cameras collect? Are they subject to the same open records laws that ours would be? And then the third general category being who, besides the university, if anyone, would have access to the fiber network? You know, we're talking about wanting to build a county-wide fiber network, and if UGA is building it, I'd like to think that we could partner in connecting to it instead of it essentially being public money to build private infrastructure. So if you have any information about that, I know I just sent that email yesterday, I'd love to hear it, but otherwise, we can just follow up between now and the voting meeting.
I think we might.
I have some feedback.
Assistant Manager Jones, anything now
Yeah,
available?
so it looks like a couple things. ACCPD does not currently have access to these systems. Footage collected by UGA PD is dependent upon their own policies, and it's not similar. ACCPD can also seek camera footage from UGA PD. As with any other investigative materials, we can request UGA for those materials. ACCPD would be requesting another law enforcement agency. So again, kind of customary that we would do certain things like that. But as to your first couple of questions, we'll have to get back to you on that.
I guess I'm still awaiting that, I'd like to keep it off consent.
Okay. A follow-up, Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I do have some feedback about this, since a lot of these are in my district. One was that this new infrastructure with the fiber optic, it will allow us as a unified government to utilize that for our smart traffic light things that we do. The way,
Sequencing.
I don't know if that's the right word for it, but the smart traffic control. And so that's something down the road that we would indeed benefit from for that. And I don't know if it's possible to, but in my mind, that could also lead us to where we have the camera's ability to give a ticket for people running red lights again. So this can help us with some public safety potential down the road because of the wiring being in these locations. And I think that we all probably are up to date on the current event where UGA surveillance cameras did indeed help us with a recent violent crime. And I think that improving public safety in any way we can is great for us to be partnering with.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, this question is for staff, and I appreciate us being able to negotiate usage of the fiber cables for the cameras, as Commissioner Wright was talking about. Is there any way that we'd be able to have potential in being able to utilize access to the fiber cable once we start actually pursuing our broadband expansion project that we've actually applied the state grant for? Could we have that access also?
Well, it's an agreement to allow them to encroach on the right-of-way. You could ask for some blank conduit, perhaps, in the same trench. I mean, we could pay for the conduit, and if they would agree to that. In this case, we were, it's one of those things where it's not a hard and fast policy. They are looking for some ability to be in the right-of-way as a governmental entity, and we were looking for something of mutual benefit, so we suggested some of their fiber strands, if you will, to connect the traffic signals that serve everybody in Athens-Clarke County. We could certainly ask for or provide some conduit that could be placed in the trench, and we could pull at a later date. These are just sort of short runs as well, but we could do that if you like, if they would agree.
Okay. I'd like us at least to go ahead and to look into that, because that's something we've discussed that we're planning on doing, so we might as well maximize our benefit there.
Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I have the same concerns. If we're going to grant this permission, I'd like to assure that there's some mutual benefit there, whether it's through the conduit or through an assurance that our police force has access to any of the security camera footage. I think that we should, whenever we enter these agreements with the University of Georgia, we should assure that there's, as much mutual benefit as possible.
Well, at this point, we don't, the PD doesn't currently have access to those systems. You know, their footage is by their own policies and procedures. Now, certainly ACCPD can seek to get it from them, as with any other investigative materials, and typically, you know, they work very closely together. I apologize. So just like with any other law enforcement agency, our PD works with UGA, but we don't have ready access to their.
Does UGA PD have an obligation to respond to a ACC PD request for that kind of footage, or is there some kind of process where they could deny it if they so chose?
Well, they are, you know, they are their own police agency, and police agencies, I think, reserve the right, the chief, in some cases, working with the DA or the solicitor, I'm just talking in general, you know, not to share footage at certain times, but most of the times, if there's an investigation of joint, you know, I've never known a time when our chief has ever complained that UGA has not provided, you know, information for them.
Okay.
I'm not privy to all those things, but this has never been an issue as far as I know.
Commissioner Hamby.
Sure. I'll just point you all to facts and issues number 1. It says the cameras will also assist Athens-Clarke County Police Department with investigations. I'll point you to facts and issues number 7. In exchange for permanent placement use utility service within the public rights of way, ACC will receive fiber communications to traffic engineering with connectivity to 6 traffic signals. As we've seen with TSPLOST, these dollars to coordinate these traffic signals add up. So UGA is paying for these traffic signals or connectivity for these traffic signals at Clover's Finley, Baldwin Sanford, Lumpkin Legion Pool, Lumpkin Cedar, Lumpkin Carlton, College Station River Road. Very high traveled roads that probably every citizen in Athens, resident in Athens, uses at some point or another. Facts and issues number 1 and 7 address a lot of the questions that we asked here tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Houle.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Hamby. And I guess just to clarify, you know, first with facts and issues 1, I think we're trying to gain clarity on whether we'll have access to the broadband for more than just the traffic signals, as we're talking about building a broadband network.
It says that they'll assist with investigations.
We're talking about the fiber infrastructure itself.
This would be their fiber. We already have some partnerships with the university on sharing just, you know, some portion of the fiber, not a large degree, for this very same purpose. We don't have a formal intergovernmental agreement to do so. In the past, they have afforded that and continue to afford us, you know, some space, you know, between the two. You know, there is some partnerships where we work with each other.
Yeah, so I guess what we're looking for, and this is, I think, if I'm understanding Commissioner Denson as well on this, is clarification in writing about if we will continue to have that access and what we have access for, and perhaps it does warrant some kind of formal agreement in order to ensure that that doesn't change over time. And with regards to, you know, facts and issues 7, understanding that, or maybe I'm mixing up my numbers here that Commissioner Hamby was referring to, but having read through this beforehand, I guess it's facts and issues 1 that talks about the police department being able to look at investigations. Our information that the Clarke County Police Department collects is open to public record requests, unless it's part of an active investigation and protected for some reason. What I'm looking for clarity on is whether UGA's is the same. Because if it's not subject to the same, then I think we have a problem of setting up an increased amount of surveillance in our community that's paid for with public money, but essentially functions as private surveillance. You know, if it's a public institution, I would hope that actually it is open to public records requests, but not being an attorney and not being aware of what contracts, if any, have been drafted to date, that's not clear to me. So I would like clarity on that before we're moving forward supporting this.
Attorney Drake, I don't know if you've had prior experience with multiple jurisdictions, including a police unit that may be embedded in a state institution like a university.
I've had some experience, but not a lot, Mr. Mayor, working with Mercer University, which I think has
Private
campus
school.
police. I would need to do some more research to make sure I was right,
Okay.
gave proper advice.
I will follow up with some more information on that. All right, item number 9 is roof replacement or upgrade, rather, at Memorial Park. And Commissioner Myers, you had a question about that item.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on facts and issues, number, I believe it's number 6. And basically I've lost the agenda item, but yeah, I guess what I think it's facts and issues, number 6, where it says that it's so important to have strong roofs to put on the solar, and that once we do this, the Sustainability Office will look and Central Facilities will look into whether or not that's appropriate down the line. And I was just wondering, and you don't have to have an answer to this tonight if you don't have it, in terms of, is there a cost benefit to doing it at the same time? Can we find out if that's something that should be done? And does it matter if there's a time delay? That's what I'm just trying to figure out.
Sure, and I appreciate the question, and also for the benefit of the public, I appreciate the questions in advance because it allows us to research it in real time, answer your questions. And so I appreciate the fact that you ask the question to us, allow us time to get it, and then ask it again in the public meeting so the public can hear it. I think that's very helpful for all. I did consult with Andrew Saunders, our Central Services Director, and there is not really any cost effectiveness to committing to the solar installation at the time of roof replacement. Given the current state of all the supply chains, there's going to be a delay in actually putting the roof on. And then, solar hopefully will continue to be somewhat of, as Andrew termed it, a deflationary product where the cost comes down over time. So if we were to commit at the time of procuring this, of buying the solar equipment, you might miss the opportunity to buy cheaper equipment, a year from now.
Right.
So we can bring forward a project concept for solar from SPLOST 2020, but hold off on that procurement until we're closer to the roof actually going on and putting it on. So
Yeah, and I believe, don't we have another document that analyzes the roof solar capacity of the county building somewhere? And I don't know how that fits in, the Memorial Park building fits in, if that's a higher need or a higher effectiveness for solar or not. So maybe just having that information, so I can save it somewhere and remember where it is next time.
Thanks, Commissioner. Any further questions about this item? Commissioner, did you want to put that back on consent?
I'm fine with putting that back on consent. Well, did we have the answer to the question? Do I need to leave it off consent so we can bring
we
that?
do have a document, but I can't tell you right now where the Memorial Park structure.
Okay.
But in the follow-up report, we can include that as an
Okay.
attachment.
Yeah, I'm fine with,
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it. All right, moving on to 10, Commissioner Myers, I know you had a question about that as well.
yeah, I was just reading through here, and this is really more for my own clarification here, that I was noticing that the diagram where it showed the bar graph, where it showed the fleet replacement program, and noted that we'll need to, am I correct in seeing that we'll need to increase the public safety fleet replacement funding by 21% annually through fiscal year '26 to meet our funding obligations? I'm just, I'm starting to think ahead on that budget now that I've gone through the budget one time.
And I'm sorry, I'm catching up with you here.
I think it's on page 87 of the PDF if you were looking in the whole.
Yeah, it's page 87 of the EPDF.
The graph. Yes, that is correct. We've got some catching up to do.
Okay. That needs to be from the general budget and not from a SPLOST, right?
Well, the SPLOST, that was cut back from what was originally
Right.
asked. The SPLOST is what the SPLOST is unless we, have some extra collections or another project comes in under budget. We're so early in the SPLOST, we don't know that yet. I think we did get a premium on the bond sales that will actually allow us not to have to will prevent us from having a cash flow issue that we had originally thought. So anyway, Commissioner Myers, you could allocate some, but this models what we have right now.
Yeah, I think I read in there that that the commission had made a decision to put off using more SPLOST funds. So I just wanted to bring that up. That's all I have to say. And
Thank
I
you.
can leave it on consent, but Commissioner Hool might have something to say.
Yeah, a couple questions. So, and these echo what I had asked by email, although again, I know I only got that to y'all yesterday. But Manager Williams, I guess the first question is, what are the ramifications of delaying approval of the SUVs, the SUV vehicles in the police department until after we have that work session that we talked about earlier this month, having before the end of the year?
Well, so again, the supply chain issues that are plaguing a lot of different parts, the automobile industry is no stranger to that. And there's a long period from vehicle order to delivery, sometimes as much as 18 months. What's going on with state contract vehicles, which we like to access just from a legal procurement efficiency vantage point, they're purchased from an order bank, which results from a first-come, first-served service for orders and delivery. And this year, because of the supply chains issues, vehicle manufacturers are indicating they will place caps on the total number of vehicles ordered under pre-negotiated contracts. So, for example, in July, Dodge and Chevy stopped taking contracted orders for many of their models. So once they cap the orders, we can either wait 9 to 12 months until another order bank opens, since we have some specific vehicles that are hybrid that we want to, or attempt to purchase the same vehicles off contract at perhaps 10 to 25% more in cost. So delays in procurement are likely to result in increased costs for the vehicle replacement.
Okay. I would like to keep this off consent to digest that a bit longer, but I would like to point out to my colleagues and to the public, first, I have no problem with moving forward with the vehicles for corrections, fire and emergency, animal services, and even the vehicles for ACCPD and the sheriff's office that match the vehicles they're replacing. But this is another example of us replacing cars with larger SUVs, and unlike previous discussions we've had in previous months on this, this includes Priuses and things, vehicles that are far from the typical, pursuit-rated vehicles that we've been replacing to date. And I have deep concerns about us upgrading to large SUVs in place of small vehicles for a variety of reasons. But, the biggest thing that comes to mind for me is we had an incident not that long ago, I'm sure most people in this room remember it, where a resident in our community was struck by an officer driving a vehicle. And we still haven't really solidified what, if any, policies there are to prevent that sort of thing from happening again. And if that vehicle was an SUV instead of a car, I think that resident would be much more severely injured, if not dead. And so I think we should take seriously the potential of replacing our entire fleet of cars, including small Priuses that are listed here, with SUVs. I understand the need for us to replace the vehicles. I'm not getting in the way of that, but I'm concerned about the size of the vehicles we're choosing. So I'll probably be introducing a CDO that I would invite my colleagues to join me on if they're interested. Thank you.
Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I share Commissioner Hool's concerns about the safety level of these larger vehicles. In addition to the incident that he referred to, we did have an officer strike a pedestrian in a crosswalk and cause substantial injury. And, if that had been an SUV, that injury probably would have been much greater. I really think we should do our best to assure that most of our fleet are the safest possible vehicles, and statistics tell over and over again that SUVs and pickup truck type vehicles are more dangerous. They're involved in more fatal accidents and more accidents in general. The sight levels, the sight lines from these vehicles, it's harder for drivers to see what's in front of them.
Just note, I don't know that anybody in this room is an expert on absolute vehicle safety from either the driver or the pedestrian perspective, so maybe direct comments toward the agenda item. Commissioner Thornton.
I think you said what I was going to say. You know, people are listening to us, and when we say things and we do not have it in front of us, now maybe you have it in front of you, Commissioner Link, but I wish you would share it with me.
I'll share some
Because
information.
when we say things, people are listening. If you don't want the big vehicles, just say you don't want the big vehicles. But let's not add to the paranoia and the fears that we're all living with right now with COVID and the vaccines. That's all I wanted to say. I didn't even care about this issue. But we're putting stuff out there that we don't have no validation whatsoever. And most people who are listening are not going to go look it up. They will say, the commissioner said this. So that's my only point. I have no dog in this fight at all. But I do get bothered when we do this over and over again and people are listening to us. I don't care if you do scooters.
Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. And so because we have, right now we have, staff has brought a TSPLOST proposal forward for electrifying the fleet, nearly $10 million, asking for us to go towards electric vehicles. And also, of course, because of our 100% energy resolution. I'm very glad that we're going to hybrids on here, but hybrids are not the ultimate step that we want here. So I would ask staff to come back and see which of these vehicles could be full electric models rather than hybrid models, since that is our end goal. And I understand that many of these, I don't think we're going to find a fully electric ladder truck anytime soon. I don't think that technology is around yet, but hopefully it's going to be here sometime. But when I look at such as animal services, though, it seems like for a vehicle like that, an all-electric model could be. So I would ask for us just to evaluate to see which of those vehicles could be all-electric purchases.
Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I've come across multiple studies in my advocacy for pedestrian safety. But, just a quick Google search, there's a 2020 study from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. The SUVs are, the number of pedestrians killed by vehicles rose 53% from 2009 to 2018. The speeds of 20 to 39 miles per hour, 3 out of 10 crashes with SUVs resulted in pedestrian fatality, compared with 5 out of 22 for cars. That's 23% versus 30%. So I think there's a long list of evidence out there that pedestrian fatalities rise dramatically and vehicle crashes rise dramatically when you're talking about larger size vehicles such as SUVs and pickup trucks. And I'm happy to do a little more research because I've been looking into this stuff for many years and it's quite personal to me.
Andrew Williams.
Well, I'll just offer that from staff and not necessarily speaking for the chief or our fleet division, but I feel sure they would agree that pursuit-rated vehicles are really the standard for police patrol operations. They have more robust electrical systems and suspension and safety features, interior finishes. I mean, this isn't your Sunday drive. I mean, these are cars that are used a lot, and they hold up better. And for reasons unknown to us, the domestic vehicle manufacturers have abandoned sedans as, pursuit-rated vehicles and have moved towards, these larger vehicles. So of the ones that are out there, and we hear the Mayor and Commission clearly about moving towards, a cleaner energy fleet, the Ford Interceptor is the only hybrid model that is pursuit-rated. There are no electrical options, in that category at this point. Now, Sustainability Office is vetting different EV options for our fleet from SPLOST 2020, and we'll have those conversations. But, the lowest cost of ownership of vehicles in the pursuit-rated category because of the hybrid status is the Ford Interceptor SUV. We also, the Ford Maverick, I think that, is a truck, but it has a 40 mile per gallon a fuel efficiency rating, and that's what we were looking for the administrative So we're trying to get to hybrids, and we're trying to meet the needs that the police department has in running their operations and trying to find that middle ground.
Commissioner Myers?
Yeah. I do want to point out that right now, with this order, that we will be saving 99,851 gallons of fuel, 944 tons of CO2, and have a financial saving of $2.75 a gallon. I might have mixed some of those things up there, but that it's a significant savings financially and in terms of CO2. And just for my clarification, because I can't remember all these things exactly, all of the ACC PD cars that being replaced, were they pursuit rated as well?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Well, yes, any of the patrol operations are currently pursuit rated. You know, it used to be the Impala, and then we went to the Interceptor, and then
Right.
they quit making the sedan, and now we're at the SUV.
so the use of the SUV as the pursuit rated is so that we can use the hybrid as well as much? Are there non-hybrid, just gasoline guzzling other pursuit vehicles? Not that I want those, I'm just curious.
It's a great question. Well, not in a sedan model. They've migrated away from sedans as pursuit-rated vehicles, is my understanding.
And I'm, obviously for electrification as we're going down here the road as well, but I did notice that the Toyota Priuses, like some of the ones that are being replaced, are really quite recent. So that drew my attention that there must be some issue there, because, there's two of them from 2013, which is probably one of the more recent ones. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify those points. And also commend the safety, the reduction in operating costs and the savings in CO2 that we'll get with these purchases.
All right, everyone, we'll continue this Athens-Clarke County edition of Consumer Reports on October 5th. I'm going to move on to new business. Item 14 is title only. One of the elements of funding for the Classic Center is a bond specific to that project, and so we'll hear a little bit more about that when we get that agenda item. Andrew Williams, anything to report on that?
Yes, if I might. And one reason I'm sorry that I've sent out a draft of it, we haven't published it yet. The Classic Center, would like to have a 36-year amortization schedule, if you will, for the bonds. I think maybe 30 was discussed at first, but they need 36 years to make it work. And I will say I've had a great discussion. Attorney Drake has led with some of the bond attorneys, and most recently with Paul Kramer, to say, this is this is a huge project. It's very complex. It has the potential to pay a lot of dividends for the community. Only $34 million of the $116 million project is coming from SPLOST, so the rest of it has to come from private bonds, which you are backing in this agenda item. And those bonds will be serviced by revenues that the Classic Center has, and as you know, there's multiple ones there. But at the end of the day, the government backs, the full faith and credit of the government backs the bonds. And so just as a hedge on risk, if we look at this from a risk perspective, I suggested to Paul Kramer that we might have a debt service fund, if you will, or some funds put aside in escrow, so that if some of the revenues don't materialize at a certain point, we won't immediately have to step in and make the debt service payment. And I'm pleased to say that Paul Graver said, well, I appreciate that. My authority has already instructed me to do such a thing. And as we were both, and Attorney Drake, I hadn't caught you up on this conversation because it was yesterday, but his figure was $2 million, which is exactly what we were thinking. So Ben Brooks, who's an attorney helping to advise us on the bonds, has proposed some language. And so we intend to incorporate that concept, that language, into the intergovernmental agreement, which will be a part of this agenda item. And we hope to do that by the end of this week, I would hope. Attorney Drake, would you agree?
No, that's pretty much it. I don't have anything to add.
So there's a slight change there to what you're looking at.
Time frame. All right, thank you. Any questions about that? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to item 15, which is the Facility Space Modernization Project, also from SPLOST 2020, and this is the Professional Design and Construction Administration Services fee. So Questions about this item? Commissioner Myers?
I did have a question. I was looking at the expenses here, and I'm hoping I have the right thing listed here, but I did see is there something in the budget, there's a site criteria analysis as part of the pre-design phase with site selection being one of the line items under the fee breakdown. Will that go, if, for example, the commission decides to not go through the site selection, will that funding line be not needed?
Yes, we would negotiate a backup there. We do want their input on, the site. As a matter of fact, because you named Croft and Associates the most responsive on this RFP, we are consulting them in a lead up to this question. And just while we're on that topic, and I'll answer your question, what I think we'd like to do is perhaps come back at the October work session with a little more information. Haven't had some time to talk to the architect. There would be a November vote. We've talked to the Classic Center, and if you determine that you want to partner on that parking deck by November, that they could still meet their targets. And that gives us time to talk to this architect and learn about what their thoughts are. I think in all cases, the decision that we might ask of you would not be 100% definitive. It would be to authorize us to go ahead and do more due diligence on that site to bring it back to you as a possible, as the candidate site. We can talk more about what that looks like, but we would certainly not be paying any extra money for fee that they did not do the work.
Thank you.
Commissioner. Any further questions? Can we move that one to consent? Yes? All right. Gene, number 15 goes to consent. All right. 16 is the proposed disparity study, and of course, we just discussed this in the work session a week ago. Any follow-up questions? Commissioner Houle.
Yeah, I thought that was a fantastic work session. For anyone who's interested in nerding out about what we're doing and planning to do, I'd highly recommend watching the work session last week for a variety of reasons, including and especially the discussion around the disparity study. I did want to just follow up. I saw that it mentions looking at MBE and WBE in the. I didn't have a chance to deep dive into the whole proposal, which I'm planning to do, but we did discuss in the work session them also looking at LGBTQ folks, disabled folks, people with veteran status, et cetera. Is that somehow captured in the work that we're asking them to do here as something that they'll also offer us information on, or would we need to add that in order to ensure we got that information as well?
It's a really good question, and something I think is very important for everybody to know with their expectations about the study. So, where sufficient data is available, that's very important, because if we've not tracked the data won't be there to assess. But where it's available, other demographics, business ownership classifications, LGBTQ, disability, veteran-owned, those will be assessed. But that ownership information is not as robust and readily available as, say, MBE, minority business enterprise, or women-owned business enterprises. So during their data collection, the consultant, should you go with MGT, they will attempt to identify those, and should the sufficient data be available, they'll assess what disparities, if any, impact those classifications. But I suspect we're going to be limited a good bit on data. Now, this is one of those things, and I think the consultant said as much, it's not a one and done. It's something that you do over time, And so we will find out our deficiencies in data, and then we'll change our processes. And the next iteration, we'll have that data. So we're learning what we don't know in this first process. But yes, Commissioner, if that's available, that will be considered.
Commissioner Myers.
Yeah, I want to thank you all for including that PowerPoint in the agenda session, the agenda report. I think that's really helpful for the public. And for anyone who wants to take a really deep dive into it, the proposal from MGT, the company that we're looking at, gives lots more detail than what is in that PowerPoint, and I found that really informative. I wanted to ask, I think it was in the history, it said, you mentioned that the finance department had reported to the mayor and commissioner on the government's previous minority business program. that went from 1994 to 2012, and that there were findings that the GOC presented back in 2020, I think. And since those were things that happened before I was on the commission, I'm wondering if those are documents that you can get me, since I'm just curious what happened with our efforts in the past, why they were stopped, and what the Government Operations Committee presented back in August 2020. So I wanted to ask for that, just so I have the background on that as we're trying this another time. I also just really wanted to emphasize again that this company includes community outreach, contracting with a local sub-consultant, and I think that's incredible. I was just talking to someone about another study and how hard it is for the out-of-town consultants to really understand the community, and the fact that this one includes this commitment to using someone locally is really wonderful. And I just wanted, in the work session, it said there was a 20% supplier diversity spend. I wanted to translate that. Does that mean that 20% of the contract funds are going to local contractors? Do you know if that's what that meant?
I'll have to find that out.
Okay. But I'm really impressed with all of this. Anyway, that's all I wanted to bring up.
Commissioner Houle.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to ask to keep this off consent, although I anticipate I will remain very enthused to vote yes for this. But I think this agenda item relates so directly to a huge amount of the concerns we hear brought to us by the public that I feel like it's likely to probably draw some kind of interest or comment from the public. And at least keeping it here, gives us the opportunity to emphasize at the voting meeting, where even more people are present and watching usually, that we are taking this very meaningful step to address the broad issues our community's been facing.
Manager Williams.
If I might, I can address just at a very high level for those that are watching what happened with the GOC, and that was basically it was a review of what our current approach is, and that is a race-neutral procurement approach. I think there was some interest in perhaps a preferential, and I think Attorney Drake at the time, the attorneys, went through the law with the GOC and said, if you do have a preferential type approach, that you really need some data to back it up, i.e. a disparity study. And at that point, I think the GOC said, okay, well, we're going to seek funding in the next budget cycle, which you did, for the disparity study, which puts us where we are today. So there were no dead ends that were run into. It was just an evolution of the discussion that leads us to tonight.
Okay, that led to this. But if there's anything from that past,
Oh,
those
yeah,
past
no,
efforts, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll share that.
All right, thanks, everyone, and I appreciate all the staff due diligence on this, and thanks to this body for funding this activity. Moving on to item 17, of course, this is an item also under discussion a week ago at our work session, and this is the proposed concept for the downtown public restroom and associated streetscape. And Manager Williams, can I ask you, just for the public's edification, would this be the last time this item would come before this body, or there would be a follow-up procurement that would have to be approved?
I'm just going all over the place here. I think that, yeah. Yes, this would be the last time, because you're being asked to not just approve the project concept, but also to authorize us to go ahead and use, go to construction phase to use on-call or state contractor services. So in this case, it's a prefab unit, and so you're authorizing us to purchase that and then move forward from there.
All right. Thank you. All right, so commission input on this item. Commissioner Hamby.
And for the public's sake, can you tell us how much this total price is going to be?
Yes.
For a single toilet downtown?
Well, the total cost is about $310,000. I think approximately half of that is the unit itself.
Right. So, so $310,000. And how much each year to upkeep this one-seater toilet?
If I remember correctly, I think it was around $30,000 a year.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Hamby. Further input? Commissioner Houle?
Manager Williams, could you clarify how much of that cost would be borne by any other bathroom we would pursue that was open to the public 24/7 and cleaned?
Well, if I remember correctly, staff's analysis would be slightly more. The design of the unit itself, if I remember correctly, lends itself to slightly less maintenance.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess.
And we can do a better job of answers than what I just did in a follow-up.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I guess I'll just share, I mean, I'm growing more and more accustomed to the sticker shock that accompanies some things. No one thinks of a bathroom and thinks of a six-figure cost, ordinarily. But when we're talking about putting new infrastructure in downtown, we're talking about having it open 24/7. We're talking about having it be both safe and sanitary with regular cleaning, which requires paying somebody to do that. The costs add up very quickly, and I do think that this is, for what we're getting, not only a reasonable amount, but as far as we've been made to understand, the best we can do. And so absent a proposal that's going to give us a comparably accessible, safe, and sanitary downtown bathroom that costs less, I'm excited to support this and move forward. It's highly popular with the public. We had, I think, over 700 responses, if I remember correctly, overwhelmingly in favor, where they were also emphasizing the desire for something to be safe, sanitary, and centrally located. Thanks.
Manager Williams, is there something you want to highlight?
I was just saying, there's been a lot of great questions asked about this, and in the wake of the work session, staff is working on an alternatives analysis to give some more information about alternatives, what their costs were, what the maintenance are, and that will be attached to the agenda report and sent to you in advance.
Thanks. I think Commissioner Wright.
I do appreciate that. I did get the email that was specifically listing criteria of different examples. This one, the new awesome restroom with 2 stalls in it at Ben Burton. And then the porta potties, I don't think that in my mind, I think we need more than one public restroom in downtown, which leads me to wanting a solution that's more financially feasible to be able to afford. And I do agree that safe and sanitary is also a primary agreeable objective. And instead of rehashing a whole work session of costs and stuff here, I look forward to seeing that, as well as if we could have what would be a more creative solution. Instead of comparing a stainless steel unit and then the other one has porcelain, maybe we could take some of the best of both operations. I would also be interested in learning more about the bathroom, the public bathroom that was, I think, designed to be in the College Avenue parking deck, but it was taken out for budget reasons. And I'd be curious to know just what that design that obviously had gone pretty far in that process to look back into that. But the other part is the infrastructure, it's just water. It's going to be solar operated at the current top. So when we think about half of a cost of a house to be one utility, and that this new unit has one toilet and that's the only amenity for $314,000, guys. It's really, there's got to be a better solution, and also give us more locations for the restrooms. But so anyway, I'll be putting together a commission-defined option that would be to direct staff to identify other options for public restrooms that may include more than one location. And so then that gives more time to come up with solutions that give us more public restrooms for our public to use, safe and sanitary, and the kind that children aren't going to crawl out from under the sides, or the kind that people are going to use because they're using the alleys now. It's very unsanitary where people are relieving themselves downtown. And I think that we can take the surveillance, the cameras, maybe lighting that happens in an alley when somebody motions. I mean, we probably should already have motion-sensitive lighting. But anyway, I think there's a better solution that can get us more, so.
Assistant Chief Daniels here. I imagine he's seen some folks who didn't even make it quite to the alley. Commissioner Myers.
Did I have my hand
I
up?
thought you had your hand up. I thought I saw your hand a couple minutes ago.
Well, actually, I did want to make a request, comment on the toilet. I did make a request, and that is that we have something on the Portland Loo, actually in the agenda report. There was in past, but now there's no picture, so people who are, this is getting all that attention, and there's no photo of the Portland Loo in there. So I would think that would be a great addition to the agenda report.
Might include that in the alternatives analysis, just so it's a complete document, if that works
Yes,
for you.
yes.
Any further input on this item? Obviously, this is not going to consent. I've read the room. Commissioner Denson.
And just building on to Commissioner Myers, like if we're going to have information specifically on this unit, like, yeah, looking up, this is a design that's been used and purchased for this amount by dozens and dozens of cities to figure out this solution, because this is a very difficult solution that all cities face. And many cities have come to, like, it's not necessarily a cheap one to solve, and that many have gone with the Portland Loo. Many of these things, some of them have been in place for over 10 years now at this point. So maybe referencing some of that in the history too could be helpful.
Commissioner Houle and then Hamby.
Yeah, I guess I just also, it feels misrepresentative to say that we're just talking about water, like it's simple and easy, like you hook up water at your home, which I think is how that might sound to the average person listening here. But that's like saying, putting in a sidewalk is just pouring some concrete like you do on your footpath at your house. But we all know that sidewalks cost much more than we expect, an average of $1 million a mile. The fact is that digging up the infrastructure downtown, all the things that go into installing anything that's permanent downtown, is going to have a high cost associated. The alternative, without having any specifics proposed to us yet, for the utilization of an existing building, is that we have a much higher operational cost, or probably a comparable infrastructural cost to significantly modify an existing building. So I guess I feel like staff has spent a long time looking at this. Plenty of other communities have used this solution. We know it works. It kind of checks all the boxes for what the overwhelming public support wants and what we're looking for as a body. And I think it's time to just move forward on this, accepting that the cost is what it is.
Commissioner?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. I don't usually accept the costs for things that they are, because I think we ought to do a good job of questioning those costs, especially if our questions lead to something better. Certainly, staff did send out a survey, and sure, there may have been 700 responses, but the survey didn't indicate what the price of a one-seater was. It just asked the question, where would you like to see a public toilet out of these locations? It gave specific locations for that survey. It didn't ask, do we need some down on the east side, down on the west side, in the center of downtown. So an option that allows staff to go back and look at different areas, various areas, that perhaps could include more than one public toilet, I think would be optimal. And I'm not suggesting this, but as a comparison, during COVID, ADDA worked with this body to pay for 4 portable toilets downtown. Cost them $428 a week. They changed them out each week. $428 each week for 4 toilets. And that's, of course, they're portable. This is not portable, which is another issue that we should really have. I mean, what if no one uses this toilet where it is and we need to move it? We've spent $150,000 in infrastructure that's not working, or it's not the right site. So there's that aspect of it. So I think there's a lot more questions that we need to ask, and so that, we bring up other communities all the time, but within Athens, we have to ask ourselves: is this? I agree with public restroom facilities downtown, but I wonder if the price tag is too much, and do we have other priorities that this community needs to meet before we make this expenditure? Other communities probably have a lot more money than we do, and aren't facing the same type of situations. Thank you.
Commissioner Thornton.
I'm just going to chime in. I definitely am not supporting this the way it's written. I think that Again, I think we do need portable toilets downtown. I don't think one is going to meet the needs I don't think it'll meet the needs. I don't see why we would be so set on this without taking in consideration other locations and cost. When you're a taxpayer and you're paying and you're paying attention to your taxes, you have a different view of some things. And I think that we as commissioners, the overseers, we have to be conscious of who is paying for this. It is not coming out no one particular commissioner's pocket. No one particular commissioner is not writing a check. So we need to make sure, if this is the dollar amount, can we get more out of one toilet, maybe a bunch of toilets? Or can we get cheaper toilets and have more toilets? We want sanitary, clean downtown areas. I don't think one toilet is going to do what we need downtown if we're trying to attract people more downtown. And you know, I always tell you, downtown is not my thing, but I am conscious about taxpayers and how we spend their money. And there are some greater issues, in my opinion, but I'm not even going to bring those up today. But I do think we need to be conscientious on how we spend people's money. That's all.
All right, thanks, everyone. More potty talk on the horizon. We're going to move on to 18, and this is here by title only, but it's something that I think is very important to this body, given it was funded in this fiscal year, and that's the alternative response team implementation. And I know we have folks both from the Athens-Clarke County Police Department and Advantage Behavioral to lend some perspective on what we'll be seeing. Blaine, I don't know if we would like to do that at this time.
Sure. Thank you very much. And we've got Deputy Chief Harrison Daniel and Dr. Shannon Kelly, Chief Clinical Officer of Advantage, here tonight to talk a little bit about the program and answer any questions you have. I would prefer to have done it in a work session style presentation. It's important that you understand the nuances because there was a lot of discussion back and forth. Mm-hmm. And what's been going on the last month or two is that the Chief and Tammy Conlon, Executive Director, and other staff have been talking about, what are the protocols in place that you're sending some non-public safety people into certain situations. And so how are those evaluated? How are those dispatched? So that the safety of all is accomplished. And I think the staff's done some really good work together. And the reason it's title only, and I do apologize, is that the attorneys are just, both sides finishing their review of the draft MOU, which you will be asked to approve on October 5th. And we'll have that for you hopefully by the end of this week. It's in Advantage's attorney's inbox right now. So with that, with your permission, I'll invite Chief and Dr. Kelly up to briefly speak and then answer any questions that you have.
And I don't know, it may be helpful, and Attorney Drake, I hate to boot you from your seat, but maybe if you all could switch places, and that way that they can sit down for a couple minutes. Come on up and have a seat. Good evening to both of you. Thank you for coming to join us. We're very excited about moving beyond the partnership that we've already had for a number of years with the co-responders between Athens-Clarke County Police Department and Advanced Behavioral. And maybe for our benefit and the public's, you might distinguish what we're talking about from the co-responders, maybe to begin with.
Sure. Would you like to start? Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely.
So the intent of this program was to establish a collaboration between Advantage and ACCPD to develop an alternative response team that would reduce the need for law enforcement presence for non-emergency police calls. So the team that we proposed was a clinician up here, an EMT, or another medical professional that would be dispatched via 911 for very specific non-emergency behavioral health calls to provide de-escalation and crisis management, to do some outreach, post-police involvement for both ACCPD and with the co-responder team in particular, to do supportive counseling referrals, and to work collaboratively with the homeless street outreach program and the services that they provide. So the kind of initial goals that we set up for this program were to reduce law enforcement presence and involvement in low-risk behavioral health calls, to increase de-escalation and engagement activities in the community where the need actually is at the time that the need arises, and to provide some peer-led support and prevention services to hopefully reduce the volume of behavioral health calls that are coming in through 911 dispatch to ACCPD. The plan was to start conservatively with a pilot with a lot of attention to safety so that we can sort of establish a foundational kind of knowledge of the typical calls we'll be responding to, and to build some confidence with the dispatch team and with the ART team. So the goal was to do the pilot in the first year, collect some data on volume and need, and then make any revisions to operational practice and procedure that we identified. At this point, we're looking at a team to operate Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., so that they have full access to crisis and non-crisis behavioral health resources, and that they have some overlap with the existing co-responder team. And then the plan would be to expand this if we find that it is an effective solution for non-emergent behavioral health calls. So we're currently finalizing the MOU, working through the details of how to set this up effectively. Does that get it?
That was a very good summary. I'll just say the first thing is I feel very good about the progress we've made working together on this project. I feel good about where we are at this point, and I just want to thank the manager's office, Advantage Behavioral, and Tammy and her staff as well for all that they put into it. So, like Dr. Kelly said, the purpose here is to change some of our response to certain types of incidents, certain types of calls. Currently we do have our co-responder team where we are already paired up a clinician and one of our officers, but this would actually remove the officer entirely for certain calls. Our priority is going to be safety, especially at the onset, because this is new. It's something that we haven't done here before. And certainly, when we respond to calls any time of day, there's a lot of uncertainty there. There's a lot of unknowns. And that's why we have set up some specific criteria and are kind of ironing some of that out to make sure that when the alternative response team goes out to a call, we're trying to make sure that it's as safe as possible based on the facts known at that time for them. And we're basing that on a couple of things based on the call type that we know at the time and other potential disqualifying criteria that a dispatcher or call taker may be able to ascertain during the actual call. And that could be something, disqualifying criteria could be something such as a crime is being alleged to have occurred, or there's some allegation that violence is in progress, or there's a weapon involved. That would certainly necessitate a police response at that time due to safety issues. So again, I think our project is prioritizing safety, and it's prioritizing looking for alternative responses to certain low-level non-criminal offenses. And I feel good about where we are.
Great. All right. Questions of the team? Commissioner Houle.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to share briefly a bit of a gush, first for the folks at Advantage who stepped up in a really big way in advance of our budget vote to put together the proposal that we incorporate into the budget, and then have really worked hard to get us to this point. And secondly, to the police department for really working to help set this up for success with Advantage. I think that's huge. There has been a major large-scale outcry locally and nationally for a different approach to public safety. And this is us taking that step in a way that is really collaborative with the people who are already hired by this county tasked with public safety. And I think that's very encouraging. So I just really want to thank the folks in the Clarke County Police Department and Advantage for getting us to this point. And also to share with my colleagues, as the mayor appointed commission representative on the Advantage Behavioral Board, we do have a meeting of that board next week. So between now and our voting meeting. So if questions arise after today that you would like to have relayed, or concerns you'd like to have relayed to Advantage in that meeting, that's also a public meeting, then please, reach out to me and share those with me. I'd be happy to relay those and bring them back to you I do ask that you do it before next Tuesday, because if it's the day of, I might not see your email in time. But thanks to y'all, and thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Denson and then Commissioner Thornton.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, thank you all for being here. And I think as Commissioner Hull put it, like being collaborative to make this a success. I did have just two questions. One, on the hours that this team will be out, how were those hours chosen?
I think because it was a pilot program, we were thinking first that we wanted to make sure that we had folks connected with the resources that already exist, because the thing that's going to make this program successful is that they're able to provide warm handoffs and coordination into needed services. Those services mostly operate Monday through Friday, 8 to 5:30, 6 o'clock. There are some crisis services that exist after hours and on the weekend. We have our crisis walk-in center, and certainly there's the ERs, but I would hope that we would want to reduce the burden on those. So I think that was the first sort of step, was getting them set up to be able to access resources. And then also we wanted them to be operating in close collaboration with the current co-responder team, because we do have some need to make sure that as we're developing this, that we're clear about who has what role, and that they have the ability to collaborate on those kinds of questions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful. And then my last question is, which I was excited reading through the draft of the agenda item, that it seems like, and I think y'all referred to, that we're going to be able to work this out with dispatch actually being able to dispatch these teams. So we've been able to work that whole situation out with. I know early on there was some concern about if dispatch was going to be able. We didn't have that process in place outside of.
Yeah, that's correct. So the purpose would be to dispatch, not just a referral after the fact, and so that they would actually be the first individual showing up at the scene. So they would, a call would come into the 911 center, then based on the circumstances of that incident and a triage process, then the dispatcher would determine whether or not the alternative response, a co-responder, or a normal police response is appropriate. And if it's the alternative response, then they would dispatch that team, and then they would respond. And then just also to your first question, our call volume drops off in the late hours of the night, and so we would have a lot lower likelihood for need during that time, and especially during a pilot program. We're looking for a higher volume to really test out before we expand further.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you all.
If I might, Mayor, too. And those were exactly the concerns I had, and Commissioner Hull, as a board member there, that's what we really want to dig in as staff and get to those protocols that are required. And you'll see those laid out in the draft MOU that will be accompanying this. And I just want to add to that, too. These can be sometimes unpredictable situations, and as the chief said, and Dr. Kelly, safety is paramount for all parties. And if a situation escalates, then I think the protocols are in place for the team to remove itself from the situation and then notify the police. So there's been a lot of great work done, and you'll see the fruits of that in the draft MOU.
Thanks, Blaine. And Commissioner Thornton.
I guess County Manager Blaine answered my question, because I was going to ask what kind of protocol and what kind of data are you going to be using to track this? So we'll wait for that. So then my next question is, when people are in crisis, of course they need, it sounds like you're going to try to point them in services after you get them stable. Are there or is there a list of people of color in the area of psychology or psychiatry that would be in your portfolio? I do think that is often missed. Having people that look like people, some of the people that they serve. So is that a possibility or outreach that we could make sure that, and we have some great psychologists and psychiatrists here in Athens that look like a lot of people that you may see in those crisis moments.
Yeah.
Is there going to be an opportunity for us to include them in this portfolio.
Absolutely. And I think you highlight a couple of things too. One thing that we'll need to develop for this team is kind of a resource booklet. And we have that kind of already in process of development with resources that are free or reduced cost, since most of the people that we tend to see at Advantage don't have private insurance or so on. But this team is going to interact with everyone in the community. And so we'll need to have a list of resources that both represents folks who may have the ability to private pay, but also folks who need exactly what you're saying, to have access to a provider who looks like them and who they feel comfortable speaking with. So absolutely, as we put that together, we'll take that into account.
Well, I am very pleased to see that this is moving on. It's long overdue. There's a great need for this type of service. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Houle.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question relevant to getting this team literally rolling. We talked, I corresponded mostly by email, about the need for a vehicle for this team. And as we alluded to earlier in this meeting, there's a huge backlog on being able to purchase vehicles. Do we have a plan that enables us to have a vehicle ready by the time we have the team hired and trained up?
Well, I know Director Conlon had indicated that that's a priority to go ahead and get that moving, and so the MOU will allow us to have a formal relationship around the scope of services, and then we'll begin trying to help them acquire that. That will come out of the funding, and you know, hopefully, I think it was $236,000. We'll be able to get the vehicle and get the folks hired, because it'll take 60, 75 days to get folks on board and in place. So yes, the answer is.
Follow-up, Commissioner Thornton.
Question for County Manager Blaine about the vehicle. What is the possibility, or did we even think about, in the current SPLOST, we have a mobile health unit written in there. I don't know where we are on that, but is that a thought? We have it in our budget that we could transition that into this mobile vehicle from our SPLOST dollars.
Well, that's a great, I'm glad you connect those things. I can't remember exactly where it is in the tiering. I remember, and if you'll remember, and I remember you had some, some comments at the time. I think it was proposed initially as a project by a University of Georgia professor, and then it changed through the process with the Citizens Advisory Committee. My recollection of what that vehicle is, a pretty substantial vehicle that can be used for different purposes. Not unlike, what we would imagine when UGA was doing some of the vaccine outreach and that type of thing. And that we need to sit down with our public health partners and decide that. I would imagine, Dr. Kelly, but I'll look to you, the type of vehicle you're looking for would be a sedan. I may not say SUV at this point.
Please don't.
But just for them to get quickly to somewhere and then get out of the vehicle and deal with the people. But yeah.
It would be ideal to have something large enough for us to have supplies and to be able to provide some occasional transport for people. But we're not looking for any specialized kind of vehicle.
Well, can we at least look to see where that is on the SPLOST tier?
Include that on the follow-up report to you.
All right, everybody. Any further final questions? All right, Dr. Kelly, Assistant Chief Daniel, we really appreciate your work on this. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you. All right.
If I might, not to
please.
belabor this, but also I'd like to point out, y'all go ahead, but they were helpful. Commissioner Houle asked about, well, tell me about the demographic data with the vaccines. I think we all recognize with all these new programs that we're putting into place that outcomes are very important. So in the MOU, I'll just ask you to note that some of the outcomes that Advantage is agreeing to track quarterly, number of outreach contacts, number of warm handoffs, number of follow-up calls from police, number of non-emergency transports, number of call types, referrals of services. So there's certain things there we will be tracking, and of course we can improve upon that as time goes on, but know that those things have been worked on, developed, negotiated, and hopefully ensconced in this MOU.
Thank you, Blaine. I appreciate that. All right, item 19 is the TSPLOST revised revenue projections and designated projects. So for the public's benefit, in some of our SPLOST and TSPLOST programming, what the commission has done on the front end is designate some projects as part of the package that's going to go in front of the voters for voter approval. This is generally done so that we can focus the resident volunteer bodies' work on an appropriate amount of money for them to then select some projects from the list of submissions. And also for our long-term planning and operational continuity, so that things that we've already put in motion, we can assure are going to continue to be in motion 5 years from now. So the commission will designate some projects the first Tuesday of October. Some of those that the commission has expressed interest in include transit operations, bridge improvement, pavement maintenance, culvert and live stream pipe replacement, fleet electrification, completion of Firefly, and the downtown pedestrian plaza on College Square. So those have emerged from multiple commissioners thus far as being interest areas. So certainly be interested in some discussion tonight if there is anything that commissioners would like to highlight or questions that you may have of staff in preparing for a vote in October. So Commissioner Denson?
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Yeah, I think the categories that you listed there are in line with the ones that I'm wishing to see. I did have, I was going ahead and also proposing that a few of these, we go ahead and find some lower amounts that these projects can be done at, or that we are going to put towards these programs. The pavement maintenance program being one that's extremely expensive, and I understand that the need is very large there, but currently at nearly $72.5 million. I was proposing that on that one, we went ahead and lowered it down and reduced it to the same amount to the 2018 TSPLOST funding amount, which is $25.6 million. On the culvert and live stream replacement program, that one is currently at nearly $13.5 million. And I'm happy to see a staff come back with a different recommendation, but the reduced amount that I was proposing was just over 11.1 million. And I pulled that amount because I went back and looked at the 2018 TSPLOST proposal that staff put forward. And I know that this body at that time reduced the amount considerably, I believe, to $500,000, so $500,000. So it's a considerable reduction there. But what I was going with is the reduction that staff came back with as their alternative proposal that was not actually implemented. And that one is at 11.1 million. And then the last one I needed to have some clarification from staff is on the number 83, the Firefly Trail sub-project number 3. And if we could find out from who has submitted this, right now it's for nearly 10.4 million, but from myself and also talking to other commissioners, people were more in line with wanting to complete the trail, but not pursue the trailhead constructions. So if we could have a breakout of exactly how much that was going to cost just to complete the trail segment that we've already committed ourselves to, connecting to Winterville, that's an amount that I would like. And then for everything else, I was suggesting a 10% reductions across the top to all of those, just to be able to leave a little bit more money in the TSPLOST bucket for other projects.
Commissioner Houle, Link, Myers?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to hear if any other colleagues share my view that the neighborhood traffic management plan, the bucket for traffic calming measures, should also be something we lend some money to. And I would like to ask staff to give us a recommendation on what like a minimum amount would be that would be a meaningful amount to actually accomplish traffic calming measures in neighborhoods where there are low-income homeowners or renters, and we're unlikely to get funding from the people who own the buildings there, the way we would with the traditional approach to funding that. So if other people are open to that, I'd like to see that in here. My one other question for staff right now is, I imagine we're not going to walk away tonight with a total consensus on exactly what we want on here and how much it's all going to be. So when's the drop dead date for when the Citizens Advisory Committee actually needs this list from us to be able to use it to inform their work? Does that have to be on October 5th, or could we, say, vote it in at the agenda setting in mid-October and still give them what they need in time?
I'd like to ask staff to confirm that, and I think they're a third of the way through their presentations right now. 91 projects, I think they're in the 30s. So they're moving through pretty quickly, and I just can't say enough about the folks that agreed with your request to serve on this committee. It's just a lot of time they're putting into it. So I'll find that out, and I don't expect that you're going to get an agenda item that's what you're going to do. I suspect there will need to be some CDO. Now, I do understand that there's some concerns about the process, and if I might, Mayor, I'll just explain a little bit about why we're going through this exercise. At the end of the day, it's up to the commission on what you'd like to do. I know our experience with SPLOST 2020, and some of y'all are part of that, where the outgoing commission suggested several, the arena, the affordable housing, the facility space modernization. And then, coming in, y'all didn't have a lot of information, so you asked to take that back off. And then the committee did its deliberation, and then those projects got added back on by this body in March after a few months. And the feedback we got, and I think after all these processes, sort of an after-action report to find out how we can do better, prompted them, and you can speak to the committee members, because some of them were like, if we had known this on the front end, it would have been very helpful, for us to really struggle to try and get this down to a certain budget, and then, the commissioners come in and change things. Now, I will say this too, and I've made it a habit now after that to meet with, user groups and citizen advisory committees to say, at the end of the day, the commissioners make the final decisions, and the advisory committee's work carries a lot of weight, but there's a lot of other factors that go into that. So this really is sort of a courtesy to signal if there are things that you definitely want to see done, it helps them to kind of move and work through those things. And that's why we're suggesting this process. Now, whether you say once and for all, you can always undo what you've done. You might just signal, just by vote, like here are some projects at these levels that the commission is really interested in. The committee may do some work and come back in their suggestions and say, well, if you can give us $5–10 million of leeway, we might be able to fit these projects in. At the end of the day, you'll take a final vote in February that will finalize it. So it's a communication piece between you going back to the advisory committee about what your preferences are based on what where you sit, and then they would come back and try and create a program that here's what you're saying, but also lends credence to what they're seeing. So it's a communication piece. It's not meant to be totally preemptive. It's just helpful through the process when we looked at the last time that we did this for TSPLOST 2020.
Thanks, Blaine. Let's see. I think I had Melissa lined up.
Yeah, I am definitely interested in including funds for the neighborhood traffic management program. That's, we voted to streamline that program and make it easier for more neighborhoods to qualify, and I think that we owe it to these neighborhoods to have the funds there to actually implement these devices. And I am interested in taking this list of what we determined to be necessary projects, but maybe skimming them down a little bit, as Commissioner Denson suggested. I like the idea of completing the Firefly Trail, but, finding funding elsewhere for the actual trailhead. And when it comes to public spaces like that, there are grant monies and foundation monies out there, and I believe that we should prioritize seeking those out. That includes for College Square. I believe we owe it to the public to include funds for College Square, but we also owe it to the public to find those funds however we can. So I believe there's room there to skim a little off and look for either local fundraising or some other monies out there that are dedicated to public space improvements. And there's lots of programs out there that do that.
Commissioner Myers?
Before I get to my main point, did the staff or anyone else submit a neighborhood traffic calming project? Or are you suggesting adding another project in here? I'm just reviewing that. Commissioner Houle.
Well, my I'm not familiar with all 91 projects that were submitted.
Okay.
So my understanding from our discussions in committee when we were talking about the neighborhood traffic management plan was that SPLOST could be a source of revenue for this, and based on just the way those conversations went in committee, I assumed that that would be among the proposals that
Yeah.
came from TPW. I'm actually not.
I'm
positive
looking
if it
through
is
them
one.
and I don't see that there, so just to clarify.
And so maybe that does beg the follow-up question of, is there anything at this point staff can do to put something like that together?
It may be helpful to look historically at use of the funds that have existed in that category, just as a baseline understanding of scale of cost. Manager Williams, I don't know if you have some other thoughts.
Well, so up to this point, well, in the past it was SPLOST funded. There is no project submitted by staff for the public for NTMP right now. As y'all are well aware, this body did adopt some changes that, open the eligibility to, for more potential projects. And I think I heard the traffic engineer right when we were meeting the other day that there's been 30 submissions by commissioners in the wake of that. And it's basically, first come, first served. And so we will run out of funds fairly quickly. At this point, and I need to correct myself too, staff has corrected me and I appreciate it. After tomorrow night, when the TSPLOST Advisory Committee meets, they will be halfway through listening to, and while I'm on that subject, so they plan to come to you in the November work session with, their kind of first pass at the project. So we pretty much need to know on the 5th so that they can move forward with their deliberations. So, to answer your question, Commissioner Houle, I mean, this body is the final decision maker. You can give direction as you see fit. You have started a process to solicit, public proposals. You just have to weigh that and how you want to proceed.
So would it make sense to wrap that into another, like say the repaving project, that we build into that a provision that sets aside a certain amount for this sort of thing? Or how would we go about doing that, I guess is the question.
Well, and again, you would distinguish between a project and, it's a terrible term, a bucket, right? And so you would fund out of a bucket for NTMP based on the merit of those individual proposals. Now, I do think that certain neighborhoods have applied for their own, but not for a bucket to cover the county. So there are a few in there to be heard by the Citizens Advisory Committee. So you could create a bucket if you wanted to and say, we want to put X amount of dollars there. You've got the policy put up, and then you could approve those as they came before you. But currently, it's not part of the process.
I had Commissioner Edwards and Hamby.
Oh, I didn't make my comment.
Oh, I'm
Remember?
sorry. I
That was just
apologize. I
that-
thought you were.
Yeah, and actually following up on that neighborhood traffic calming, I would think that would also need to be something that would go through the citizen committee, because there's a lot of different priorities in that list of 90 projects. I did send out an email today that I do have serious qualms about designating 60% of the TSPLOST budget and only of the $140 million and only leaving $60 million for the remaining projects, that I'd assume add up to over $500 million, but that was completely ballpark figure. And that's, I'm on the commission now. I served on 2 selection committees. I know I do want to give them guidance, but I also want to give them room. And so I am very interested in only giving, the essential must-have projects that are on there in terms of maintenance and such. And there's so many projects right now that are submitted from individual districts, and especially from districts 2 and 9. And I don't want to significantly limit the number of those projects that can be included or vetted by the TSPLOST committee, because we've pre-designated so much. So I have some qualms about that. About the fare free transit, I need help from my colleagues understanding why this is the only source and why this is not something we want to put in front of a citizen committee to get a broader take on that as well. So I support transit totally as an alternative transportation person, but I just still have some questions about that. And so those are the points that I have. I do want to ask Commissioner, we don't need it right now, but Williams, if he could get us how much money we've been able to spend yearly on paving for the past 5 years. So what the average has been and how much money we have left over for like the TSPLOST. I think there's about 6 or 7 million in there left over, and we'll be able to finish that by the end of the program, or if there'll be money left over there.
Will do.
Thank you.
Commissioner Edwards.
I feel good about the list moving forward that I'm hearing echoed by colleagues, and I am excited about College Square because I think it really has transformed downtown and been a really great decision that this body has made. It's a wonderful public space that every day is packed with people of all ages, really in the heart of our city. So and with a little of it, with some investment in TSPLOST, we could even enhance it even more with landscaping and more comfortable infrastructure. So I'm really excited about finishing out that project and really creating a marquee destination right in the heart of our downtown to complement our historic infrastructure and wonderful local businesses. It really, civic engagement, it really benefits the whole county. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Hamby.
Sure, thank you. So if we're designating 60% of the dollars amount here, and the Citizens Committee's already gone through half of the projects, I really don't see how we're being courteous to the Citizens Committee in that standpoint. You know, if this was going to happen, this should have happened before the Citizens Committee was formed, so that they know going into it. I don't see anything wrong with going to the Citizens Committee saying, hey, you put together a list, but just bear in mind, at the end of the day, the mayor and commission may change this list, which we have done a lot. We did it on the last SPLOST program. Even the stuff that came back recommended was amended, added to, or taken away from. I will say this too, on the SPLOST program, in comparison, that was a 10-year program, actually 11-year program, because if y'all remember correctly, we added more money so that some of the projects could get done and added on the ones that we were designating, like the Classic Center, and we did it previously. I think Commissioner Myers was on that one, where we added dollars to that one over 10 years ago now. So I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. I think we're doing the Citizens Committee a disservice, and I think we're doing this community a disservice by not at least letting them go through the process and listening to the presentations, making a recommendation, and then it comes back to us. I'm sure they expect us to make some changes. I'm hoping that's been expressed to them already, but to just all of a sudden arbitrarily say we're going to decide how to spend 60% of these dollars, which is just a 5-year program. That's another difference. The SPLOST was 10 years. This is only 5 years. To say arbitrarily we're going to spend 60% of those, or you don't know enough about things, so we're going to decide for you how to spend that 60%, or we know better. So let's let them decide. Come back and we can make some changes if we need to, or we may not need to. But I think we owe it to the people that are giving the time to help us come up with a list. Thank you.
Commissioner Thornton.
I think that Commissioner Hamby had said pretty much what I was going to say. I've been back and forth with County Manager Blaine this afternoon by texting and sharing my concern about how do we get ourselves in these positions where when things are moving, we intervene. And I think the word that I used before about the renaming is how we move the goalpost. This is another goalpost move. You have, I don't know how many people are giving their time and listening, writing these proposals, and then we step in and we swoop in like we're God. I don't know, and I don't know how in good conscience any of us should feel about that. We want citizens' input. We talk about citizen participation. We talk about getting input. Yeah, and I take it real personal because this is the first time my district has had proposals in the pot. This is the first time. For the past 4 years, we have paid a penny and not benefited from some of the other things some of the other districts have benefited from. And we didn't complain, we still paid the penny. But now we get in the game, you want to change the rules. This is ridiculous. Be about what you say you are. As long as you tell me what the rules are, I'm good. But when you start messing with it when it gets in the middle, because it looks like you're not going to get what you have always gotten, it's wrong. So no, I don't support this. I do think there are some common issues we could come together, but let them go through the process. Give them the same respect that they thought they were going to get as the Citizens Advisory Committee. And it should not have happened. This should not have happened. Either we should have told them at the beginning, these are the things we would like you to look at and prepare them for that, or we should wait till they bring us their presentations and either make some changes or accept it as is.
Any further commission input? I will note, just in terms of calendar, when we provided a TSPLOST calendar from the very beginning, this was a prospective stop along the way. So this is something signaled kind of early on. Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. I wonder, I mean, they're already a committee. Can we ask the committee to take a vote if they want us to do this or not? They want recommendations? We go through this whole thing. I mean, if they want that, right, it changes everything. If they want this from us, then we should do it. We're not forcing it on them. So can we ask them to take a vote and see if they want us to bring these things forward to them or not? And that will kind of settle this whole argument that we're having.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Commissioner Houle, and then I'll circle back to Commissioner Thornton.
Yeah, I mean, if they're meeting tomorrow, I like the idea of getting a vote just to make sure this is something the full body wants and not just a person. But I fear that maybe we're talking past each other a little bit here in that I see this as us sharing with the Citizens Advisory Committee things that we think we're likely to want in the end, and asking them for their feedback on our list as well. So I don't see this list as us saying, this is what we're saying needs to be in it, and it has to stay there. I see this as us saying, here are some things we're anticipating we're really going to expect to need there. What do you all think of that as well? And maybe they come back and say, well, that all makes sense, but you've got to reduce it by a bit because there's so many projects in these communities that haven't been invested in enough that we need to allow more money for that. I guess I feel like we're kind of stuck with two options here, where one is we give them some kind of understanding of where we're currently thinking in terms of these big infrastructural projects, commitments we made in the budget about transit, needs we know we have about failing bridges and failing, water sewer pipes and things, historic tendencies around repaving countywide. And maybe they can come back to it. Anyway, I'll lose my train of thought here a little bit, but we can either provide that kind of overview, that we're understanding is likely to be a need community-wide, or we don't. Either way, we still have final say in the end. In one scenario, they're guessing what we want, or they're having to go back and watch this meeting and try to parse what they think we're likely to all agree on at the end. So I'd rather find some way to come to at least a loose consensus on what we generally are thinking is important. And I also think your point is well taken, Commissioner Thornton, that we need to probably double down on the highlighting of equity that we've done earlier in this process and say, we're expecting this committee to bring back recommendations in accordance with the principles we've laid out around equity and investing in communities that have not been invested in historically. And maybe even invite explicitly them to challenge our current thinking on where the priorities should be if they think that we're out of line there. I'd be open to that, but I do feel like it is valuable for us to provide some kind of clarity where we as a body are likely to land in terms of our priorities countywide.
Commissioner Thornton and Myers.
Early on, County Manager Williams asked some ideas of how directions to give to the committee. I submitted an email that said, we need to look at equity. And in that email, also communities that have not been served. Those were my two, and there was a third one. I don't think I want to go back and ask the committee what they want at this point. I don't, whatever, I'm just to the point now. I just say what I have to say, and it goes wherever it goes. I don't think we need to confuse them. If this is the route that this body wants to go, I'm good with that. But equity and communities that have not been served before, that have paid the penny for some of the luxuries some of your other districts have had, to me, that should be a top priority. My other thought is that at this point, I appreciate Commissioner Houle recognizing equity. If this had have been a commission in past years and equity was not what we all, most of us, ran on, this would not be no big issue for me. This would not be serious for me. I will tell you that, and go on record saying, I will not support a TSPLOST. I will not encourage anybody to spend another penny until other people get the advantages like other folk have gotten. And it really bothers me because some of us, I really thought we were on the same page about equity. But it seems like we're more concerned about our particular little area, and it's getting me really emotional now. Because every time we have an argument, or not an argument, that was the other thing, Commissioner Denson, this is not an argument. This is just sharing differences of opinion. And I'm sharing my difference of an opinion. It's not an argument. But every time we get to a point where I look to this commission to stand up on equity, the real yous come out. I will not support a TSPLOST if folk that, and I know y'all think I'm just one person, but don't be fooled. I will not support a TSPLOST until y'all are serious about taking care of those people who have not been included, not just in TSPLOST, in everything. In everything. And it's 10 after 8, and I'm going to excuse myself at this point. Thank you.
Colleagues, I will note that thinking about all of those project areas around which there was at least multiple commissioner interest, really there were only 2 that were site-specific. The others were countywide programs. And so one thing we may consider, if it would be the will of the body to have any designated projects, is to only designate projects that are in fact countywide projects, pavement maintenance, live stream replacement, for example, those transit. So that may be something you may want to consider.
Mayor, I don't know if we're all listening to what's being said, but when I hear discussions about participatory budgeting, I don't ever want to hear that again. If this is the direction we're going to take, I just don't. So don't bother me with it. We have a citizens committee. That have listened to half of the projects already, and now we're going to turn around and say, oh, psych, we're going to change this up on you. And sure, it may have been on a calendar, but we should have had it on the calendar early on, and did it and made some designation before the committee. I don't even know if I agree with Commissioner Denson's list. I don't think I do. I think some of the expenses on there are a little bit much. I think Commissioner Myers brought us some good questions about some of the federal funding that we get for transit. We were able to offer fare free transit because of a $10 million grant that we got the year before last. So there's grants that come along with transit. There's grants that are coming down once this transportation bill gets passed that are going to help us with some of the things we want to do, like live streaming. As according to the website, there's still $13 million sitting in the last TSPLOST for road paving or for pavement. If y'all remember, I was asking when we had the LMIG list that we double up on the contractors so that could move faster. But if we can't work through that amount of money in this time frame, then why would we put another $25 million in there? So these are questions the Citizens Committee could ask and vet. All of the projects that are on this list or they're on the 91 list, are a part of those projects come from our Transportation and Public Works, so they can listen to them and they can vet them as well. But let's don't do a disservice to the Citizens Committee and to a process that we have said that we want. Thank you.
Commissioner Myers.
I did have a couple of points to make. And that is, I think we do need to clarify what we're discussing here, because when Commissioner Houle said, oh, these are ideas for the committee and they can use them, my understanding is that we were actually pre-designating certain amounts of money firmly the same way the commission had done after the fact in terms of the Classic Center or I don't know where it was, on the space modernization project in the Classic Center. So, and I thought we were doing that up front. The second thing on that is that as someone, again, who was on the committee, our weight, our voice, our opinion holds a lot of weight. I mean, with the commission, the people who are serving on that committee. In fact, I would get a little frustrated sometimes because some of my fellow people on the selection committee would be going, let's see what the commission think. And there weren't these long discussions beforehand. And I was like, well, they haven't actually looked at all 90 of the projects and read them all. So we have a much more powerful voice than they're not going to just say, oh, well, that's what, they're saying that, but let's do something different. They're going to take our voice very seriously. And I think my issue here is really with the large percentage of the money and leaving such a smaller percentage for the Citizen Committee. And I think, Commissioner Thornton was talking about the equity part, and I'm thinking about the people who have served on the committee, but there's also all those people who put those projects together. And they were thinking they were projects that were going to be picked out of 140 million, not out of 60 million. And so that's where I feel like it's a little bit confusing, misleading to the public in terms of what we're doing. And I just want to, if we give them a designated list, to give them a very defined minimal one. I will say that on the committees that I did serve on, guess what? Everyone voted for the pavement and the bridges and the things that were necessary. And that seemed to be the case in the two that I served on, the one that I observed very closely in SPLOST 2020.
Thanks, Commissioner. All right, more to be determined clearly. Commissioner Denson.
I'll just bring it up again. I mean, I thought we were in this conversation because we were asked, at least we've been told, at least some TSPLOST members have asked us to do this.
Just one, I think.
Well, yeah, and I guess I just like clarification on that. And if they want us to do this, it's going to help them do their job. That's why I suggested they actually vote to decide if they want us to do this or not. If they don't want us to do this, they see this that we're budgeting in, they want to do their process. I am happy to respect that. And then, as Commissioner Hamby said, just make changes at the end, which is always what happens. That's fine. Just I want to have clarification there. If they feel like it's going to help them do their jobs, well, I want to help them do their job. So if we can ask them to actually give us guidance on what they want, which again, they vote on things all the time. I've seen those meetings. I don't understand why they can't just have a vote.
Manager Williams, can you describe the engagement thus far?
Sure, and this is just based on feedback from the last advisory committee, and it was baked into the process from the get-go. We originally had envisioned having a vote on this September the 7th, but it was delayed. And I understand there's been a lot of really good points made tonight, and really, y'all can decide, what you want to do here. And certainly, I think they've got 3.5 hours or so of presentations tomorrow, but there'll be some time at the end of the meeting, and we'll pose the question to them if that would be helpful to them. Whether you pre-designate it or whether you just communicate priorities, that's up to y'all. It's just meant to be, trying to be helpful. There's good points made on all sides here. We'll ask the group to give you some insights from where they sit. They may have a different idea altogether.
All right. We've got a couple of items that are title only. As LRC Chair, Commissioner Wright, did you want to make any mention of elements of the Human Relations
Yeah, I
Commission?
just want to say we're working really hard so that we can have something for the October meeting. I suspect that we're going to want to, we may even want more time if this body would allow us to, so that we have time for the public input. But we're working on getting the mission, ambitious timeline done. But, as we're seeing, sometimes commission-defined options give less time than optimal to fulfill the task, but we're going to work on it. I don't know if Assistant Manager Jones has anything else to add.
No, ma'am, I think we should have something prepared by October 5th. So I think that's the timeframe that we've been working on, and so we have 2 more meetings. The next meeting, we'll have to make some decisions, and then hopefully come to some sort of consensus on the 5th meeting, and then October 5th, hopefully we'll be here.
Right.
And LRC members, I know you've been working overtime, so checks in the mail. Yeah, Commissioner Hool.
I just want to share real quick that staff has worked overtime to make this happen too. I mean, they've been incredible. So I shared this in our LRC meeting, but when I've dreamed of what committee work could be like this is it. They've been efficient, fruitful, we've been informed in advance, people have shown up prepared, staff's been awesome, colleagues have been awesome. So I feel really good about where we are and excited about hopefully having something we can all agree on in a couple weeks.
Commissioner Hoyle, I appreciate that, and I'd like to take this time to thank Crystal and Sarah George for all their hard work behind the scenes, and they're doing great work. Really appreciate that.
Great. Thank you, Assistant Manager Jones. Thank you, Commissioner Hool. Definitely kudos to staff for what they do every day. All right, friends. Yes.
Sorry. So there's another agenda item I just asked the mayor to consider, and we had a meeting this afternoon with the Food Bank of Northeast Georgia and the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission about the CDBG CV application to assist the food bank with building some additional facilities out on Newton Bridge Road. And so the timeline is dictating that I've asked the mayor to consider putting on the agenda an agenda item, which we will get to you hopefully later this week, that you would be asked to do 2 things. One is approve the resolution as required by DCA for the submission of the CDBG grant, where the applicant would be ACC Gov for the benefit of the Food Bank of Northeast Georgia. And secondly, approve the hiring of an architectural firm that, to be determined, the selection committee made up of Food Bank of Northeast Georgia officials, some of our staff, and Northeast Georgia Regional Commission will be meeting this week to review the applications and make a recommendation. Those are the 2 things you'll be asked to vote on October 5th, and that will keep us on track for a November 19th submission. There's some other, actions after that, but that's what's on the immediate horizon for that project. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Manager Williams. I appreciate that. I also want to make a note that the wording for that resolution regarding the second Monday of October's Indigenous Peoples Day is forthcoming. I know there's some folks on campus who are working on that. So action many local governments have taken to, I think, more appropriately recognize that day on the calendar. And we do have 1 planning and zoning item. And so I am going to move down off this. My chair back so the screen can come down. And Brad Griffin from planning is here.
The mayor's here. Yeah, sorry.
That's what we call it. It's been a great holiday. The school is out. So we did day off school. You don't see this much going from commercial neighborhood to single family.
Thanks for sticking around, Brad.
Pleasure.
All right, I think we're ready to go. We've got one zoning item tonight.
All right, that's all we've got. One, the straight rezoning request at 650 Pulaski Street from commercial neighborhood to RS5. Current future land use is mixed density residential, which does allow the RS5 as a compatible zoning classification within it, so there's not a need to change the land use map if this is to be approved. Overall subject property is about 1.25 acres. Currently has one existing dwelling unit on it as well as a studio. Partial rezoning of just a little over 8,000 square feet to create a new parcel for a second dwelling unit. You see the property here on the eastern side of Pulaski Street, and generally, I know the red dashed line looks like it's encroaching into the older industrial building that's used as the studio now. It's just the way that aerial looks. It is not picking up part of that building. But that's the proposed area to be rezoned. Mixed density residential does allow for RS5, but it does not allow for RS8, which we have generally in the area today. But rather than create an amendment to the future land use map, the applicant opted to go with an RS5, but asked for a lot size that's equivalent to RS8, not big enough to get 2 lots out of RS5, so it's still committed to a single lot if approved at a little over 8,000 square feet. You see there the proposed zoning change to RS5. Planning Commission recommendation is to approve with conditions, and these 2 conditions are really development related, but it sometimes helps to leave them in the ordinance for a reminder. There will be a requirement to extend Athens-Clarke County sanitary sewer to this lot, as well as recording of the subdivision plat before that house can be permitted and constructed. And so with that, the Planning Commission recommendation was a unanimous approval.
Thanks, Brad. And this is in District 9. Commissioner Thornton isn't with us. I will say this is up the block from my residence. And I anticipate that the neighbors find this acceptable. I don't know if there are any questions from commissioners. All right, I think we are good to go. All right, thank you, Brad.
Mr. Mayor, I move to recess for 5 minutes, 7 minutes for restroom relief, oxygen.
All right, we'll go ahead and recess for 5 to 7 minutes, and I will see you back here for conclusion of our special called session.
Is your husband doing better?